everybody. For this video, we're going to go over Fabled lands in the Enchanted World series. It talks about all the fabled, mysterious lands and their oddity, and the oddities of the places in various myths. Hy-Breasail is one of them, and we'll even, in one part in this book, go over Hades. So let's begin. The beginning pictures in the chapter pages, entitled "Don't Show Much." This landscape, but if you look very closely up here, it looks like some building, and closer look, you zoom in, and it happens to be a castle. And afterwards, you get a nice little fairy tale castle as well. And when we go to the back, this is the same castle at night. Not much impressive, I will admit. You know, they never promised gold in any of these. But here we have first chapter, Journey into Wonder. And briefly looking at this is about a man who looks into a city through a bowl of water. Of course, then afterwards he wakes up and finds this. Let's see, read chapter. No one could tell where the portals to other worlds lay. A sultan once looked deep into a golden vessel filled with clear water. When he raised his head again, he found himself in an unknown shore at the beginning of a new life. Doesn't tell much after that, with other pictures or all that, but that's where you read the text for. Here we are, a bunch of people around a campfire, and here there's a outline of a castle, sort of half transparent, more solid at the bottom. Let's see. And the Irish told of ocean islands that were sometimes visible and sometimes not. Landing on one such isle, called Hy-Breasail, sailors found that, their watchfires called forth demons. Hy-Breasail I've read in Michael Moorcock's Coram series, and also, if you ever watch Eric the Viking, they mention Hy-Breasail, so. Here we have a picture of a clouds of a man on a horse, a flying horse. Here we go. A man among gods. The earliest mortals to leave their own world, storytellers said, were people who visited the heavens and conversed with the gods. One of these was Hatting, Prince of Denmark. Hatting's early life was hard. His father was killed and his throne usurped by a Norwegian lord. The boy was sent by his countrymen to Sweden for safety and for training in the arts of war. When he was grown, he returned to Denmark to avenge his father's death. But Hatting was still young. His venture failed, and he was wounded. When all seemed lost, a stranger came to his aid, a one-eyed sea rover who took him unconscious, to his own home. There, in a high thatched hall, a Danish prince was healed of his wounds. When he was strong again, the sea rover told him that he would fight a lion and slay it. He must drink the lion's blood and absorb its strength for victory. The one-eyed man said. Then, sorry if I'm not really pronouncing this right. Then he set Hatting behind him on a horse, covered him with a cloak, and conveyed the prince to his own country in darkness. Events ran true in the prophecy, and to the prophecy course. Hatting gained a lion's strength. Man flocked to him and killed the invader and freed Denmark, taking his rightful place as king. He knew where his good fortune had come from. On the ride toward Denmark, he appeared out of from the concealing cloak. He saw the clouds racing around him, and far below he saw a gray and rippling sea. Asgard, the god's sky country, had sheltered him. His benefactor was one-eyed Odin, father of all Norsemen. So that's Odin and his horse Sleipnir. And Sleipnir's got his own strange story. Very interesting picture of some knights. Eyes closed, looking downward. The mountains of England, Ireland, Wales, and Germany hid ancient warriors. Men sealed away for centuries in the realms of sleep until their countrymen called for their aid. That looks like something you could wrap a story around in today's fantasy. A picture of a man and with a woman overthrown from a horse, and there's a second horse beside him. I'll go ahead and read the story. The drowned kingdom of Kyries. Not all hidden lands were territories of Faerie people. Some held mortals caught in enchantments. The The Breton city of Curies, which long ago lay hid massive dikes on the western coast of Finisterre, was destined to become such a place. Proportions, so it's better, better sight here. At one time, it was a rich city kingdom ruled by a man named Grelin. He had a beautiful daughter, Ahise, who he loved dearly. Never seeing an evil within her, Ahise had a passion for young men. One by one she seduced him, and one by one, and she had finished with them, her servants strangled them and threw their bodies into the gorge behind the city. Of all the court, only one man suspected Ahise. He was Gwynole, her father's counselor. But he had no proof of her murderous ways and dared not speak to the king. A catastrophe finally loosened his tongue. One day the city dikes were opened by a pale young man, clearly expelled by Ahise. The sea poured into Curies, swirling through the streets and into the houses. From his palace, Grelin and the king saw what had happened. He raced to the courtyard, leaped onto a horse, and pulled Ahise up onto his saddle, and galloped away from the onrushing water. Gwynole galloped beside him, but the waters was too swift. Caught in a surge, the horses flailed and struggled, and at last Gwynole spoke. "Cast off the she-devil who clings to your saddle," he shouted. At his words, Ahise gave a hissing cry and threw herself into waves. Instantly, the floodwaters ceased to rise. The king and his counselor took the look at the city. It lay submerged, and there it would remain. In later days, the Bretons said that Curies lived and would emerge from the sea again when the right spell was pronounced. And they said that Ahise continued to haunt the region, a spirit of the sea, whose petty songs enticed sailors to their death off the shores of Finisterre. Here we go. Man underneath the hanged body there, fiddling with his shoes. Let's see, the caption reads: "The gates into the dominion of Faerie were most likely to open at peculiar times of year. When an Irish warrior named Ura touched the hangman at the eve of Samhain, the corpse spoke and guided him out of the territory of humankind." Two-page right here. See, near on one side, burning castle in the background, and there is a cave where, despite the nighttime setting, actually leads to daytime. So there we go. Nero saw a vision of his chief's fortress put to the torch by invaders. He followed the warriors to the archway at the hillside, a door to an elder world. In this picture here, in the land beneath the hill, Nero found a wonder. A crown hidden, in a guarded well. The crown was a talisman protecting that domain. Of course, the crown is located right here. Here we go. Very nice picture. An opening in the sea, a sea or land, a whirlpool, a lake, a cavern, a well might mark the borders of enchantment. A whale caught Finn's Diarmuid. He challenged the guardian of the water and plunged to adventure. I won't read this story there. It's a bit, possibly a lengthy one. An Enchanted Archipelago. This is an Irish myth. The tale of Melduin and his brothers. Think of this sort of as the Irish version of the Odyssey. They travel around, and as they approach all these different lands... Oh, I skipped a page. Sorry. There's some strangeness about them. For instance, found this one island where there's these giant ants. So they had to escape from that in a hurry. They came across a castle where, despite the emptiness of it, except for one cat, they tried to follow the rules of hospitality. They only ate the food that was presented there. One man saw, a golden torque, which is sort of a necklace. And he was going to take it since no one was around, but despite his warnings of the leader, and the cat ripped right through him. Came across a land where there's some sheep, out grazing there, but there's a dividing line, and whenever the sheep went one side or the other, it turns into either black sheep or white sheep. A very gruesome one where you had this, an island of the, filled with these dark robed and dark skinned mourners. They elected one of their own to go there and ask questions about for help or whatever assistance they could. Sorry about the glare. But as he did, talked and he asked them, they touched one of them touched him and he became one of them. They couldn't do anything about it, so they had to leave. And one of the Enchanted Owls here. I didn't read what was this one. And here they came across in the ocean a silver tower with a net going up around it. And of course, they eventually did finally reach home, despite losing many of the main characters' brothers in the process. So, Realm of Eternal Night. Seeing a long ship in the background of the ocean. Some more text. Here we go. Let's see what this is. A bunch of Norsemen traveling on a road with spikes with heads on them. Grim was a trail to Deadlands, as Gorm of Denmark found. Near the end of the dreary march in bitter cold, he and his warriors passed under an empty stare of skulls. There were sentinels set to warn off intruders. A couple of archers there fighting up against something very dark and gruesome on top. Roused from their long sleep by the touch of human hands, old demons swarmed down upon Gorm's company, ravenous for the flesh and blood of the living. Alright. See, one was a sword looking at a man, looking up at her. From the dead, the living sometimes won aid that averted their own demise. So it was Svipdag who approached his mother's grave in Iceland and received weapons and charms that would guard him on a bride quest. See a man looking through a fiery, a fiery wall there with a looks like a village inside. And against a very snarling wolf. In a realm of giants, a rampart of fire barred the fortress of sorry if I can't say this, Zipdag's bride. With the help of his dead mother, the young man breached the barrier to find the maiden he sought. Oh. I don't know why there is a rooster on there, but maybe I'll explain in the text. So... looks like something about people from Babylon. Oh, Mesopotamia. In Mesopotamia, people told how the goddess Ishtar journeyed to the Underworld in search for a lover. To the guardians of that realm, she gave her power that she might be reunited with the dead god Tammuz. Continue on. Aha. Something Egyptian. Let's position this. Alright. Words of the dead lay hidden everywhere. Under the desert of Egypt, along the dark river, the souls of the departed lived in gloomy caverns, brightened only for an instant each night when the sun god Ra passed by on a bark towed by jackals and cobras. Picture here, Norsemen sang of Balder, heaven's favorite son. When death claimed the shining god, his brother traveled to the underworld and, speaking for a grief-wrecked cosmos, begged the ruler of that realm for Balder's return. Huh. Let's see. No less than gods, men, and women sought lost lovers in the world beyond the grave. Most such efforts were in vain, but the devotion of a Breton knight was rewarded. He found his wife in a valley of shadows and drew her back into the light. Sounds like a more successful Orpheus story. Here we go. Very gruesome picture here. What's this all about? Because of a vow, Asmund the Norseman went alive to the funeral burrow of his foster brother. He found that death had created a demon. The corpse awoke and, raging with hunger and flesh, attacked him. Must be the Draugr, so undead of the Norse mythology. Now this one again, I won't read the story here, but if you're familiar with what was it, the Aeneid by Virgil, this will become familiar, and also just talks about Aeneas' journey through the Underworld. So as we cover forth, you talk about the Guardians, Cerberus and the Charon, the Rivermen, waiting souls. Aeneas is being guided through this by a Sibyl, as it is called. Let's see. Oh yes, it talks about Dido, Queen of Carthage, who Aeneas had to leave, and she killed herself in grief. Now, this is the gates of Tartarus, where the Titans, where most of the Titans went after the gods defeated them. The fate of those who disobeyed the gods: Sisyphus, pulling a boulder up and down the hill, and this one is Tantalus, who cannot drink from the water and cannot eat from the fruit, so suffers from eternal hunger and thirst, never finding rest. But not all of Hades is dark and gloomy. You do have nice places here. And so eventually his journey ends, well, at least in this part, and he will go home and eventually create the Roman Empire. A Parting of Worlds. That's chapter 3 here. A couple of children have very flowery dresses and such. Oh, here we go. With a different rhythm. With its different rhythm and rules, the mortal world sapped the strength of those whose home was Faerie. Once, a green child from an enchanted land was trapped among humankind. He faded to a wraith and finally breathed no more. Let's see what this is about. As if to show that different worlds must be forever divided, Menanan, Ireland's sea god, passed a cloak of enchantment between the hero Cuchulainn and the fairy woman Fand, erasing from each the memory of the other. This looks a little gruesome here. Somebody on a bottom end of a bed. The changeable nature of the otherworld folk struck fear into mortal hearts. A Norman knight's fairy bride, found shifting into serpent's shape, was banished by her husband and his people. Oh, can't blame him. It's like Indiana Jones' worst honeymoon. And here we got a caption on the bottom here. Let me position this. See a man that up against many people up on a hill with the same color scheme here. Wandering in a wood where the way was lost, Helgi Thorensen of Norway crossed a border he did not see into a land he did not know. There, a princess of the land of that land caught him in enchantment that dissolved all ties to his own folk. So, a continuation of that story. The tears of his people summoned Helgi Thorensen back to his own land, but he could no longer see it. Frail now and blinded by the powers of Faerie, he belonged to the princess, and he had found in the wood between worlds. Yeah, see a man's daughter become, and it's a shotgun wedding. It's a beautiful picture here. Entranced by Niam of the golden hair, the warrior O'Sheen left his kin, in country. Across the western sea from Ireland he rode, carrying the princess back to her hidden realm. Ugh. I know some of you people may not want to see something like this, but The land of Faerie was beset with dangers. On a sea isle, Oisin found a beast that threatened Niam's people, and in this way he proved his valor to his bride. And of course, in the land of the young, where the tree gave forth flower and fruit together, and time was different from mortal time, Oisin and Niam were welcomed with honor. Of course, things aren't so happy ending for everyone. Longing for home, Oisin left the land of the young, but centuries had passed. His people were gone, and when his foot touched Irish soil, the mighty warrior turned into an old man. Now, let's see here. What's this one about? A man who never slept had fairy blood. A story they were told of Breton Prince Tydorel, who was just such a man. The revelation kindled the young prince's heart and sent him in search of his unknown father. Tydorel found his fairy father rising in welcome from the forest lake. The prince plunged into waters and was never seen again by humankind. I guess I'll put a long story short. Now I think I'll read this one. This is the final story of the book, and some wonderful John Howe art. The Countess of the Fountain. 3 nights of battle were in the court of Arthur, recounted the bards of Wales, Codweir, the Earl of Cornwall, Lancelot du Lake of Owain, the son of Urien. And this was their characteristic, that would not retreat from battle, neither for spear, nor for arrow, nor for sword. The knights had need of stubborn courage, as the tale of Owain shows. They watched for adventure in worlds not their own, worlds encircled by ancient mysteries and ruled by laws that were baffling to humankind. Owain went seeking a certain country that he had heard about from his fellow warriors. In a summer month, he rode north from Arthur's stronghold at Caerleon. For many days, he traveled through high mountains, eventually reaching a border region where uncharted forests swept into the distance as far as the eye could see. He found a castle in this borderland as his companions had said he would, and were kindly strangers greeted him and feasted him. Finally, they sent him away on a track that led into the forest depths. In the heart of the wood was an old god, a giant creature dark as night. The god stood on a single leg, regarding the intruder coldly. His antlered head brushed against the tree branches. Then he called. The animals of the woods streamed into the clearing, clustering into the grass at his feet and bowing their heads on the ground. In the face of such power, Owain bowed too. Then he asked the god where he might find adventure, as if it were not adventure enough. The god's eyes crinkled with laughter and at the man's presumption, but he spoke. He told Owain where he must ride and what he would find there. Kind of to see this picture here. There's a tree in the background. The light there is sunlight, where all surrounding parts is rain. And Owain left him. The knights followed a track where a forest to a sunny valley where a single tree towered, spreading enormous sheltering branches all around. In this tree's shade stood a stone fountain. On this fountain, fastened with a silver chain, a silver bowl lay. As the god had forbidden him, Owain leaned from his horse, drew water from the fountain using the silver bowl, and then poured it out. Among the surrounding woods, thunder rolled, the sky darkened, the wind howled, and borne on its fury came a volley of hail, clattering against the shield Owain raised above his head, and bouncing thick and white as stars upon the grass. Man and horse braced silently at the gaze, and waited. The fury ended, as suddenly as it had begun. All the leaves of the great tree had fallen, and Owen head into the now bare branches. Bright-colored birds sang and greeted the returning sun. Owen had no time to listen to their singing. However, a warrior rushed down from the forested slopes of the valley. He was the guardian of the fountain, and armed all in black and mounted on a black charger, and his lance was at the ready, its tip leveled at Owen's heart. The young man had time only to swing his horse around and lower his own lance into position before the enemy was upon him. The force of the impact broke both warriors' spears and knocked the men into the ground. After a stunned moment, they rose and drew their swords. Back and forth under the bare branches of the tree they fought, wielding their broadswords with strong, skilled hands, grunting with each swing of the heavy blades and each impact of steel on shield, leather, or mail. The fight was slow and brutal, and after a while the warriors could hardly lift their arms. Owen was a victor in the end. He found an opening and, with a last mighty effort, brought the blade down upon the Black Knight's helm. The metal cracked, scarlet blood spurted out and spurted over it and mantled the knight's shoulders. With a cry, the man turned and he stumbled to his horse and swaying, in the saddle, fled. And this one again, so much brightness in these pictures there with a glare. Owen is, approaching this castle with a rainbow, no, not a rainbow, just a castle with a clear sky ahead. In the moments it took for Owen to mount, the Black Knight disappeared into the woods, fringing the valley. Owen continued in pursuit. However, the horse pounded through the woods and out the other side. Ahead, the black horse, with its broken briar, raced across long water meadows, sending up flocks of startled fowl towards the walled and towered city that crowned is so far at a distance. The city gates were open. The Black Knight, with Owen now close behind, made for him. The knight gained the outer gate and disappeared through the second gate of the city's inner curtain. Owen galloped through this outer portal, but as he passed under the arch, the iron portcullises in both gates crashed into the ground. Spikes in the outer gate stabbed through the horse's back, and the animal crumpled. Screaming, Owen rolled free. He was trapped in a narrow strip of land between the two sheer walls. On the far side of the inner gate, a road lined with houses and throngs was shouting people swept into the city. 100 hands reached up, to ease the Black Knight from the horse. Owen leaned against the stones of the wall and stared through the bars. His gaze had returned from the other side. A woman stood within, a fair young maiden robed in white. And here's an interesting scene. "It is you who wounded the guardian," she said in the softest of voice. "I am the one," he replied. "If yon Black Knight is he, the people will turn on you, in a moment. Take this ring and hold it so that the stone, is turned into your hand. It will hide you from them. When they raise the gate, come to where I stand on yonder horse block. Put your hand on my shoulder. Tell me you are there, and I will lead you to refuge." "Lady, why should you do this?" "The slayer of the guardian became new guardian," said the lady. "My task is to set you in the Black Knight's place, as lord of the Countess of the Fountain. I am Luned, the lady's servant." All happened as Luned had said. The mob turned toward the gate where Owen stood, beside the broken body of his horse. Screaming, he drew up the inner portcullis and surged into Owen's prison. But they could not see him. The ring protected him. He walked through the jousting throng to the horse block that Luned was. He pulled his hand lightly on her shoulder, showing not even a flicker of surprise. She stepped down and began to walk through the town. She led him into the courtyard of the palace and stood at the center of the city and up the winding stair and tower. The chamber where Owen sheltered was fit for a king, hung with scarlet and gray and ornamented with gold. Owen bathed in a tube of bronze inside the charcoal fire. Then Luned served him with from dishes of silver. She left him, but she returned from time to tell him the import of the sounds he heard below, and a great wail that signified death of the guardian. That the formal lamentation that meant he had been laid on his bier and carried into the courtyard from his chamber window. Owain watched the chanting priests, the lords and ladies, still a status on their horses, and trumpeters with their golden horns. And in the center of the crowd, the bier, guarded at the head and foot with flaming tapers. The candlelight shone on the hair on the woman who stood beside the bier, a white-faced golden woman whose wailing sounded high from the trumpet's call. "This is the Countess of the Fountain," said Luned, at his elbow. "She whose lord you must be. I will take you to her when the time is right, for 2 days and nights, while the black..." Let's see. What a black night's burial rites took place in the and the lady mourned. Owain waited in his chamber, served by Luned. On the third day, Luned led him to her lady. But the Countess turned her head away and would not reach her hand to raise him from his knees. "This is the man that reft my lord's life from his body," she said. Owain glanced at the direction that Luned. The maiden was moved by her mistress' words. "What harm is there in that?" she said. Is he a better knight than the guardian? Your old lord's time had passed. This is your new lord and new guardian." And so it came to be. The Countess of the Fountain called her lords and barons together and told them that the new guardian had arrived, and they accepted Owain. Their safety depended on the safety of the fountain, and they therefore eagerly greeted its champion. For 3 years, Owain remained with the lady, protecting with spear and sword and fountain that held the secret of the land's health. In the words of the chroniclers, whenever knights came there, Owain would overthrow them and hold them to ransom for the full worth, and that wealth Owain distributed among his barons and knights, so that his dominion had not love for a man in the whole world greater than their love for him. Let's see, he was a guardian of the people and husband to the lady. His life was one of honor. Images of his own world, of Arthur and King, Lancelot and Gawain, and his companion in arms, faded from his memory, but he was called to his own world again. A day came when Owain rode forth from the city in answer to thunderclap that signaled intruders on the fountain. Ground. Sorry to say it right. As his predecessor had. Owain galloped across the fields and through the forest into the valley where the fountain stood. A knight waited there for him. He unhorsed the man with ease, but this man was not alone. With the precincts of the fountain, he pitched a splendid camp, gay with silk and ablaze with banners. The wounded knight stumbled from onto his encampment, and his fellows immediately shouted challenges to the victor. On the next day, Owain fought another of the company, defeating him, and the next day another, and the next another. But at last, a man who seemed to be his equal faced him. These two struggled all through the day and the night. When the torches were lighted in the shadows, when both men staggered with exhaustion, Owain knocked his enemy helm from his head and saw in the torchlight the face of his cousin, Gawain of Orkney. Owain's sword dropped and greeted his cousin and named Gawain the victor. Then the companions of the Round Table met again with joy, together led by King Arthur. They rode to the city of the Countess of the Fountain. Together they begged that Owain might leave her for only 3 months to visit his own country and his own people. The lady gave her consent, said the chroniclers. She found it hard. Owain stayed not 3 months, but 3 years. For when he was again with Arthur's company among his kindred, the memory of the lady vanished from his mind. He might have stayed forever, except that one day a strange woman rode into the hall at Arthur's court. She called Owain a traitor for deceiving her lady. Then she vanished. Some storytellers say that the visitation roused Owain's memory and in the other world and drove him mad with remorse. He left Arthur's court then and wandered the desolate mountains, wraith-like and wild, living among the beasts. He was rescued at last by a gentlewoman whose name had been lost. She took Owain into her own manor and healed him. He departed alone, armed and mounted, and to find the lady whose lord he was and the land was whose guardian he was. But the boundaries of the worlds were shifty, and the wilderness were many. Owen rode solitarily through many days and nights before he found a way he sought. A lion guided him to it. It happened this way. As Owen strode along one afternoon, leading his horse to give it a rest, he heard a harsh cough and a snarl from the thicket. He plunged through the bush and saw a lion, white as snow, bristling with fear as it couched by the boulder. The beast was emotionless, caught by the great stare of a serpent that was poised to strike. Swifter than thought, Owen acted. His sword swept down repeatedly, cleaving the serpent into twitching pieces. Released, the white lion bowed his head to him. When Owen left the thicket, the beast followed. It paced beside him as he took up the trail. When night fell and Owen stopped at the clearing of the woods, the lion vanished, later returning with the roebuck it had killed. Let's see. Sorry for the here. Owen bit the fire and squatted beside it, clearing the game and tossing pieces of to the lion from time to time. As he worked, a moan sounded and then another. The cry came from a boulder, it seemed, but the boulder concealed a cave mouth. "Who lies in the cold ground?" called Owen. The horse ignored the scene, but the lion watched alertly. "Luned lies in prison here," came the answer from the rock. The knight caught his breath. He must be here now, he thought. He asked, "Why are you in prison there?" Thus. "I brought my lady a husband and a guardian of the fountain that protected our land. This guardian left her before his time. 3 years he had gone, and the people say the fault is mine. For the fault I lie here in the cold until a warrior came to burn me." The voice trailed in silence. "I will meet them," Owen said. When the two men came to drag Luned from the prison, the knight was waiting. He sat astride his horse, his shield over his shoulder and his sword unsheathed. The men drew up. They challenged him. He attacked in kind, and they attacked. Owen was weaker than he thought after his long wandering. He was thrown from his saddle by the first blow of the warrior's lance, and the pair of them bore down on him, and he clambered slowly to his feet. But just then, with a roar, the white lion leaped over Owen's head, and the two warriors its great weight dragged him to the ground. The curving claws of the fangs gripped into their throats. Within moments, the beast was feasting on their flesh, and its snowy coat was spattered with scarlet. It paid no further attention to Owen nor to Luned when Owen freed her. Then Owen and the servant of the Countess of the Fountain rode together to the lady. She welcomed him with joy and without reproach, for by rules no mortal understood, the thread of her life was entwined with him. They had some weeks together, and one day they stood beneath the tree that overspread the fountain Owen guarded, and his lady told him this. He could not stay in the world, for he was immortal, and he would always be drawn to him. "Then let us leave it," Owen said. "Your life is tied to mine now. Let another lady reign over the city. Let another man guard the fountain." The lady assented. She left her own world behind and rode away with Owen. It was said that she lived at Arthur's court for the rest of her life. What became of her country, the story does not tell. After the lady left it, the veil seemed to draw beyond the place. It was never seen again by mortal eyes, but it may be that it still thrives, sheltered from time and change. It may be that the fountain eternally flows, and the night eternally guards it, serving a woman who rules a hidden land of Faerie. So there you go. That is the end of this one, and thank you all for watching. That is Fabled Lands. You all have a nice day.